Hello, everyone. This is Shahzad Mirza from Global Cyber Alliance. Just as a reminder to everyone, we do have a questions box that is available to you in the GoToWebinar control panel. If at any point in time you do have any questions for our presenters, please feel free to post those questions in that control panel, and our presenters will do our best to answer the question either during the webinar, but most likely it may come towards the end of the webinar. So again, what we'll do is about submit it to start time, but we'll actually start 2 minutes after the start time. So we'll start in about 3 minutes. Thanks. Just so folks know, we're going to start in exactly 2 minutes from now, just as people are joining. Thanks. Hello, everyone, and welcome to session 2 of week 6 of the GCA Bootcamp. This is our last week of sessions, and the Bootcamp will close out on Thursday. Just as a reminder, before I switch it over to the presenters, there is a questions box that is available to you in your GoToWebinar control panel. If at any point in time you do have a question, please feel free to post those questions in that control panel, and our presenters will do our best to either answer the question during the session or most likely going to be at the end of the session. So at this point, to save you from hearing from me, since you've been listening to me for the past 4 weeks, let's go ahead. I'm going to switch it over to Abdullah and Shabazz from DMARC 360.
Hello, everyone. My name is Abdullah Mirza. I'm the co-founder and director of DMARC 360. And Mr. Shabazz, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Good day to you. This is Shabazz from DMARC 360. I am the senior consultant here, and have a good day to you all. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask during or after the session. Thank you.
Right. So the purpose of today's session is for you to understand how to read and analyze DMARC reports, which includes what information to focus on and what action you can take in accordance with that information. Now, to start, I'm sure you all are familiar by now with the main purpose of the DMARC framework. As you can see here, when implemented properly, with DMARC, only your genuine emails will reach your intended receiver, and whoever attempts to spoof or impersonate your email will not succeed and be rejected according to the DMARC policy that you set. Now, for this proper implementation of DMARC, we need to analyze the reports that we get through the DMARC record from our email receivers. Now, there are two types of these DMARC reports that our email receivers send back to us. There's the aggregate report and the forensic report. Now, let's go through the content in these reports, and then we can dive deeper into how to analyze them efficiently. So the aggregate report, which is here on the left, is received every 24 hours, and it contains information related to your authentication checks, which are SPF and DKIM. For just a quick reminder, SPF record authorizes your IP addresses to send email on behalf of your domain, and the DKIM record adds a digital signature to your emails. Now, going back to the aggregate report, as I mentioned, it is received every 24 hours and has information related to those to authentication checks. Now, along with this, it also contains where your email was generated from, which is the IP address where your email was sent from, and the total amount of emails it received within those 24 hours. Now, the forensic report here on the right side is received when someone attempts to spoof your email domain, which means the way you identify it's a spoofed email or not is by the SPF and DKIM check. Now, this means that if the SPF and DKIM fails, this is when someone has spoofed you. So this is when a forensic report is generated. And for every email that fails both these checks, a forensic report is generated. For example, if I let's say spoof Mr. Shahzad there from Global Cyber Alliance and send 1,000 emails out, I will receive 1,000 forensic reports. So what this forensic report contains is the header from address and the header to address, the subject of the email, and also in some cases the body of the email too. So the forensic report may contain confidential data. Now the forensic now from here we can identify the purpose of both these reports, what they are, what we can use them for. For the aggregate report, as you can see here, the purpose is to help enhance your SPF and DKIM configurations. Now, again, as it contains the result of these two authentication checks and tells you where your email came from, you can identify your genuine email sending points and authorize them through the SPF and DKIM. Now, the purpose of the forensic report is forensic analysis, which is to identify if that email contains any malicious links or content that you might need to take action on. Because again, this is generated when both SPF and DKIM checks fails, unless otherwise specified in your DMARC record, but the default value is to generate the report when both SPF and DKIM fail. So now that we know the purpose of these two reports, before we dive deeper into it, I would like to mention here that the proper implementation of DMARC means making sure your SPF and DKIM mechanisms are configured properly. Because as we all know, DMARC is a framework that is built upon these two mechanisms. The proper configuration of SPF and DKIM, as we saw, is done through the aggregate report, where you see the IP addresses where your emails are sent, and then you can fortify these two records. Now, before any further ado, I will show you a sample of the aggregate report. And I'm sure all of you are confused when trying to read and when trying to read it and understand it. This is where we recommend using an online platform to analyze these reports. Now, what these platforms do is parse or translate these reports into a graphical, human readable format where they categorize your outgoing emails. And most of these platforms out there categorize these emails into 4 categories, which are, as you can see here, DMARC compliant, DMARC non-compliant, forwarded, and threat. So let's take a closer look at each one of them and dissect them one by one. So the DMARC here, the first one, which are DMARC compliant emails, these are emails that have either passed SPF or the DKIM check. This means that the email was sent through a verified source, as it was sent through an IP authorized by your SPF, or it contains your digital signature, which is the DKIM. As you can see here in the first one, the SPF and DKIM both are passing above 99%. And in the second one, only the SPF is passing, not the DKIM. But it is still DMARC compliant because only one of the checks need to pass for DMARC to pass. Now, the next category, which we need to focus on, which we'll focus on more in depth later on, is the DMARC non-compliant emails, which we can also say are misconfigured, which is a better way to put it. Now, this is where your SPF and DKIM checks are failing, yes, but the reason they are failing is that there's a misconfiguration in your SPF and or the DKIM record. Now, these misconfigurations can include a syntax error in your SPF, or maybe your DKIM is enabled, but let's say the public key is not published on your DNS, so the receiver can verify your digital signature. So from this category, you can identify these issues and remediate or fix them. Now, the next category is the forwarded emails. This is when your email receivers have a forwarding rule which applies to emails it is receiving from you. Now, for example, if I send an email to, again, I'll say Mr. Shazad here from Global Cyber Alliance, and he has a rule, let's say in his mailbox, to forward all my emails to his personal email address, then this type of forwarded emails will be shown in this category. Now, these are the ones that are automatically being forwarded. Now, in these emails, as you can see here, the DKIM, your digital signature, needs to pass. Now, one of the main purposes of the digital signature is to add a layer of integrity, which means verifying that the message, the body of the email, has not been tampered with, and this is your original message, which is how it passes when the email is being forwarded. So after this is the next category, which is the threat emails. Now, these are genuine, actual spoof attempts, which means both, obviously, you can see here the SPF and DKIM both failed when the receiving mail server tried to authenticate your emails. So just to summarize, these 4 categories are the ones that most of the online platforms categorize your emails with. These are the 4 categories they provide. The DMARC compliant, which are emails that pass one of the 2 authentication checks, SPF or DKIM. There's a DMARC non-compliant, which shows the misconfigurations within your SPF or DKIM record. The forwarded emails, where your DKIM has to pass, of course, if the email isn't tampered with, that is. And then there's the threat emails, which fail both the SPF and the DKIM checks. Now, this information is what we get from the aggregate reports. Now, all of these categories, this is what the platforms, and this is how the platforms analyze your aggregate report and categorize them. And this is what helps us in implementing DMARC properly. Now, what I mean by this, proper implementation of DMARC is, I'm sure as we all know, there's 3 policies of DMARC. There's the none policy, quarantine, and then the reject policy. Just quickly, I would like to just go through the purpose of having these policies, which is, by the way, what helps us in implementing DMARC properly. So the none policy is what we refer to as a monitoring mode. This is when you're receiving these the aggregate and forensic reports, but you're telling your email receivers not to place any action on your emails that fail SPF and the DKIM. Now, the reason for this is for you to analyze the information in the aggregate reports and identify all your genuine email sources and configure your SPF and DKIM record, authorizing all your genuine emails. Now, after this, you move on to the quarantine policy, where you tell your email receivers to accept your email, to still accept your emails, but mark them as spam if they fail the SPF and DKIM check. Now, with this policy, you can then check if your genuine emails are being put into the spam folder, which would mean there's still an issue with your SPF or DKIM. So in this scenario, with this policy, you can further identify and fix issues within your SPF and DKIM configurations. After that, obviously, is the reject policy, and this is when you're telling your receivers that my SPF and DKIM are working properly. Any email you receive that fails both these checks, reject the email completely. So this is what the aggregate report helps us do. Now, let me show you these the reports and dive further, a little more technical from our DMARC 360 portal. Here you can see the first category that we have are the compliant emails. Now, we don't really have to there's no action to be placed within this category, because these are already the ones that are passing your SPF and the DKIM. As you can see here, both SPF and DKIM. This is the screenshot that I have put into the presentation as well. The next one that you need to rather focus on is the DMARC compliant, non-compliant, these emails, which we don't have any because we've done our implementation properly. The thing is, in this category is where I said you can figure out your misconfigurations. Now, how you figure it out is I'll just jump back to the DMARC compliant emails just to show you what the receiver does to verify that your SPF and DKIM is genuine. So if I click on the source, now this is the in-depth. This is what your aggregate report has. So if you see here the DKIM, I'm just gonna quickly increase these column length so you can see what each one of them say. So let's say for the DKIM here, it needs to first do a domain match, which is verifying that the from domain matches the DKIM signing domain, which are 2 different things. So the DKIM signing domain is the domain that signs that email, and the from domain is where the email came from. So this does a domain match, which it matches the 2 domains. Now, after that is the authentication. This is the column where you can find out your misconfigurations. If this has anything other than pass, it may have a temp error, which is a temporary error, or a perm error, again, permanent error, or a neutral result. If it shows that here, which means there's a misconfiguration within either your SPF syntax, or again, your DKIM is not enabled properly. It's not signing your emails properly. After these 2 is this column right here, result. This is the policy evaluated. This is the final result. This is what it bases whether your DKIM passed or not. This is what this column tells you that. Same thing with the SPF, the columns here. I'll have to shorten these columns to show you. Yeah, so here with the SPF it's the result. I'm not going to elongate the columns. You can see this is again the domain match, same as the DKIM. So you can see here domains are matching. This domain is DMARC360.com and the sender domain here is DMARC360.com. So the authentication check, again, that's passing. There is no problem with our syntax, and the final result, as it shows here, is pass. So this is what you need to pay attention to when looking at the DMARC non-compliant emails. Now, after this comes the forwarded emails. These are emails that, again, are being automatically forwarded by your email receivers. Now over here you can see your DKIM needs to be passing. So if it's not, it's either that the email was tampered with, which again it should end up in the threat category, but if it's not tampered with, then your DKIM should be passing. Now here again, if we open this, obviously you can see the SPF here fails. The domain doesn't match because it's the sender domain is different from the signing the SPF domain, and DKIM passes because again the DKIM checks you are the one that signed that digitally signed that email, so the DKIM domain still matches, and the authentication passes because there are no syntax errors there. And again, the final result is pass here. With the SPF, it's a fail because the IP of whoever forwarded this email is not our IP, so we have not included that in our SPF. Yeah. So after this is the threat emails. This is where you see genuine spoof attempts of your emails. Now here, if you go into unknown sources, you can see there are these 4 reports given to us by Google. This here, the report, this column basically says report provider, which is google.com, which means someone who's using Google email services received this email and sent back the report. You can see here the SPF, domain match, authentication, and result. They are all failing, and DKIM as well. It is all failing. Now, what you can do further is, so a lot of times if you want to, dig into an IP address and find out if it's malicious, you'll have to manually check and look up the IP. From here, from this DMARC 360 portal, you can simply just click one of the IPs, whichever one you want to look at. Here you can see the location is China. The email reputation is poor, and here you see it is listed in CBL and PBL blacklist. So this is a known malicious IP which is spoofing us. And this, again, if I go back to the report, this you can see the action that was applied on the receiver end was reject, which is our DMARC policy because we have done our implementation properly. So these emails did not receive whoever it was when it was trying to spoof us. So after this, so all of these categories you see here, DMARC compliant, non-compliant, forwarded, thread, these are all from your aggregate report. Now, if we move on, let me go back to the presentation here. Going back into the present mode. Yes. Now, if we move on to the forensic there. Now, the forensic report. Here you can see a screenshot of one of the forensic reports where, again, you can see the from address, the to address, the subject, and the header of the email, the body of the email. Now again, forensic report is sent when SPF and DKIM both fail, which means it's a definite spoof attempt. So just to give you an idea, so the forensic report looks kind of like this, and you can see the IP here 58.100.106.167. The aggregate report that includes this email is right below it, where you can see the DKIM and SPF result both are fail. And there's a Saudi1.com. This is one of our domains, which someone was trying to spoof. So this is what you do in this aggregate, in this forensic report. You can then identify if it has any malicious content. So from that, if there's any malicious links there, any malware there, then I would suggest you report that, and you take some action on that. Now, without further ado, let me go back to the portal. Yes. Now, from here, you can also see your sort of compliance view. This is another view that some of the portals out there have, where you can see the total amount of emails that passed SPF, the total amount that failed passed, DKIM, and it shows you how many emails, what action was placed on it on the receiver side. So these are all the emails. Of course, they passed SPF and DKIM, so they were all accepted by the receiving mail server. Now here, SPF is passing, DKIM is failing. 15 emails delivered. Again, it was 15 because one of them has to pass. Same thing here with the SPF failing and the DKIM passing, and these emails are still delivered. Here again, your SPF and DKIM, it shows they are both failing, 11 emails, and all 11 of them have been rejected. Now this obviously depends on your DMARC policy. So if your DMARC policy is set to quarantine, these emails will be quarantined. So going back to the in-depth analysis, yes. So this is how you should do your implementation properly. Now, there's a lot of people out there that I have noticed who, when implementing the DMARC, when configuring, let's say, the DMARC record, when they configure it, they go straight to the reject policy, which again it's wrong, because there's a lot of big companies out there which don't know all their genuine sources, all their IP addresses that they're using to send out emails. And there might also be, let's say, a third part, let's say an email marketing service that they may be using, which would again come in the non-compliant or the threat emails. So this is one point that I want to touch on. If anyone out there is using an email marketing service, the from in that, let's say if you did include their SPF, their SPF record in your SPF record, so their IPs are authorized by you, it may still fail the SPF result, because as you see here, as I said, the receiver does 3 checks, which are right here: the domain match, authentication, and then it gives you the result. So the domain match would fail because I hope you all know what the Shabazz, if you can remind me, what's that return path? Yes. Now the return path is when you send an email out. Return path is where bounce back email goes. So in this case, if you have email marketing service that you are using, it is important to ask them for a custom return path, so you can then your SPF will be the domain would match and the authentication would then pass, since there would be no errors there, and that's when the result of that SPF would be passed. This is one of the common problems I've seen in a lot of places. So this is what you get from the aggregate report, and how you can implement DMARC properly from the none policy all the way to the reject policy. And this implementation, these analyzing these reports, it can take up to 4 to 6 months, because so it can take up to 4 to 6 months to analyze all these reports and to verify properly that all your genuine sources have been verified by your SPF and your DKIM. And after what we suggest is there is no point looking into the forensic report, which is the report that is sent when both of these checks fail. There's no point of looking at that until you complete the DMARC implementation process, which is when you identify all your genuine sources and authorize them. After that, you can go and you can configure your DMARC record to receive forensic reports, because then after that, any forensic report you do receive, most likely that is a genuine spoof attempt, and then you could do analysis on that and report and take action on it. So I would like to ask Shehbaz if you would like to add anything on top of this. You have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Abdullah. So, yeah, everyone, the point that Abdullah is trying to convey is that we have seen many issues from some of our customers who implement DMARC, but they don't know how to properly configure the DMARC record and how to implement the compliance of their domains. So we have come across this for many times that some of their customers have issues with their SPF domain. The return path address is different than the from domain, in that case the DMARC authentication fails in most of the emails. Similarly, we have seen you might have, if any one of you have seen the DMARC reports, there are some cases in which emails which is auto-generated or out-of-office emails that is being sent through the mail servers, that is also non-compliant with your domain policy. So these are the checks which these are like few of these checks that you need to check before implementing DMARC to quarantine or reject policy. So the best way is to do it, you go to the monitoring mode, analyze your domain, combine your sources, and then go to the quarantine or reject policy. So that is the best way to implement DMARC. Yeah, yes. And also to analyze your third-party sources, if any. Yeah, your domain is sending out emails through a third-party source which you yet not have configured through your SPF or DMARC, you need to comply on those as well. Yes. So these are some points which needs to be configured before implementing the DMARC quarantine or reject policy.
Yes. And at this point, we open the floor. I can't. If there are any questions, there's the question box right here. Please feel free to ask. Are you aware of any email security signatures called MTA? Can you advise if there is any conflicts this might create? Is it doing the same thing as email?
So if it's all right, I can take that. Yeah. So there's a question about, are you aware of a new email security standard called MTA STS? This is something we'll actually talk about on October 17th. So I'm going to ask that you hold and ask that question on the 17th. We'll actually bring up MTA STS very briefly and just talk about what it is. But if we could, just for this presentation, please let's stick to DMARC. Any questions about the DMARC reporting and aggregate and forensic report?
Yes. Again, I would like to state they asked if it's doing the same thing as DMARC. Now, DMARC framework was created for two purposes. It was for us to tell the receiver what to do in case the SPF and DKIM fail, and the receiver can send us reports of what happened with our emails. So this is where the forensic and aggregate report comes in.
Yes, and as Shehzad Mirza is saying, there is no conflict with DMARC using MTA STS. It's two separate functions. You can set up an MTA STS record yourself, but DMARC works that it doesn't have any effect with that. Okay, we have a question with what is ARC authentication?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so ARC is actually it is how we can say it. It's authentication mechanism for the forwarded emails. If you have come across to forwarded DMARC reports and you see if there is a override reason for any of the reports in the DMARC results, so that probably sometimes you would see ARC, and the bypass reason is ARC, which we said. So that actually means is that authentic receive chain. So sometimes what happens is that Google has this ability. Let's say, for example, Google is one of the mail servers who is checks for the receive chain. For example, if any forwarded emails is been sent throughout multiple hops, it checks for the authentication at each hops and gives the result in the header of the email. So that information is saved through the ARC, which is the authentic receive chain. That's how it preserves the it does not let you apply the receiver to apply the DMARC policy.
Mm-hmm.
That's just of the ARC. We will have this conversation in the next few sessions, as said by Mr. Shehzad.
Mm-hmm.
So again, as a reminder, if there are any questions, please feel free to post those questions in the questions box that is available to you in the go to webinar control panel. This is your chance to ask Abdullah and Shahbaz about the reports, any questions that you have about DMARC or SPF and DKIM as well. So just as a reminder, so just as we're waiting for questions to come in, so, I mean, this is the last week of the GCA Bootcamp. We do have one more session tomorrow from another presenter. So in case you haven't done that, so there'll be another session about ongoing DMARC management. And then on October 17th will be the wrap-up session. And in the wrap-up session, we'll just review over everything that was talked about these past few weeks about DMARC, the SPF, and DKIM, as well as we'll also provide you with information about those like things like ARC. So people are asking about ARC. People are probably asking, there'll probably be questions about BIMI. We'll do a very high level introduction about both because both of those themselves can be taken hour long alone just to talk about and explain. But we'll just cover a very high level and point you to resources where you can go into that. We'll also talk about other email authentication protocols like people are mentioning, like MTA, SDS. We'll just mention Dane very briefly as well. So these are other ones that you can use alongside with DMARC, because DMARC is not the only one that you should be using. There are other ones that you should also be consider using as well.
Yeah.
So there's two other questions that popped up.
Yes.
Does DMARC 360 offer dynamic SPF service?
Yes. So to address this point, I would first like to say, so dynamic SPF. Now with the SPF record, there's this rule that there should not be more than 10 DNS lookups when you configure your SPF record, because the include mechanism or the MX mechanism, requires a DNS lookup to look at what IPs they have. So this dynamic SPF is what enables you to have more than 10 lookups, because I get the portal, we flatten that SPF record and we keep those IPs on our portal so that your receiver does not have to do all those lookups more than 10. Now this is a very rare case for anyone to have, but we don't offer that yet, but it is in the pipeline. Yes. And there's another question here, which is what triggers the forensic reports to send? Now, there is a default value for this, which is when both the SPF and DKIM fail, then a forensic report is sent. But you can also configure this in your DMARC record, whichever way you like it. You can configure to, if DKIM fails, then send the forensic report, or if SPF fails, then send it to me. And you can also say either one of these records that fail, send me the report, doesn't matter which one, or you can say if both of them. So you have the option to do that yourself, but the default value is both of them fail, and then the forensic report is generated. Yeah.
Okay, so we don't see any questions yet at this time. So we'll wait another 2 minutes just in case there are any other questions. But again, reminder, like we were mentioning before, October 17th is the last day of the GCA Bootcamp, at least the last webinar of the Bootcamp. You do still have the availability of services as well, so the community forum is still will remain open after the Bootcamp, or there's no intention of closing it out. So feel free to join that if you haven't already. So that's community.globalcyberalliance.org. So please register there if you want, and you can ask and post any questions there as well. We have invited all of our presenters and the DMARC vendor organizations as well to join in there so they can answer any questions. But that's just, the questions are meant not to ask about their products, but more about what DMARC, SPF, and DKIM are and their capabilities are as well.
Yes.
Abdullah and Shabazz, if you provide the contact information.
Yes, so you can, if you have any questions, you want to contact us, you can contact us at support@dmarc360.com. That is support@dmarc360.com.
And I will go ahead and post that on the community forum as well, because I know one person already has asked that to be posted there, so I'll make sure that gets updated on there if I haven't already.
Yes.
And we don't see any questions at this time, so I really want to thank Abdullah and Shabazz for doing this presentation for us and answering all these questions that we got through from these folks and the attendees. So again, thank you very much to both of you for providing us this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Shahzad.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Shahzad.
All right, thank you, everyone, and we're going to go ahead and close out the session at this time.